I've lived 1,000 lives. I've piloted 1,000 souls. I've killed and fought and died just for another role.
This is the Happy Jacks RPG podcast, a roundtable discussion that's a mix of friendship, humor, unbridled enthusiasm, and tabletop RPG topics sent in from around the world.
Just for another role.
Hello!
Wait for it.
And welcome to Season 34, Episode 13 of the Happy Jacks RPG podcast. My name is Kimmy.
I'm Pooja.
And I'm Vixie. We'll get it right eventually.
Yeah.
It happened at some point.
Yeah. Well, with the magic of technology, Vixie is able to join us from the other side of the country at the moment, and we appreciate it. We're happy. Yay! In today's episode, Jolene wants to talk power imbalance in Supers games. Verk from DC, we know you, Verk, sorry. From DC, it's like the DC and the Verk like melded in my brain. Anyway, Verk from DC wants to brag a bit. And from the archive in 2017, Julien from Paris, France, asks how to play with flashbacks and flash forwards in a game. If you'd like to contribute a question or story to the show, you can email us at happyjacksrpg@gmail.com, or you can post in the mailbag channel of the Discord. Please do either or both of those things. We could use some emails, friends. We're running a little low.
We love you, and we love your emails.
Yeah, we do. We love you. We love your emails. We love your problems. And we also love, like, your success stories or your rants about random gaming things and all those things. We love all the things. Announcements. Our next game days will be September 28th. You can join the Discord at happyjacks.org/Discord to join or to run or to play in games. There's a bunch posted right now, and yeah, it's a great, fun community, super chill, great way to try out new games because there's always a strange assortment and plethora of games that is trad games, indie games, random games, always available. So it's lots of fun.
It's a veritable smorgasbord.
Smorgasbord. I'm using this new curriculum called Kindergarten Smorgasbord, so I get to say that word all the time.
It's such a good word.
Yeah, and I am tired at the end of the day though, so I keep saying it wrong. So my teaching partner is now we're just making it up. The Smogasgoogle, the Kindergarten Smogasgoogle is this what we do because we're tired.
Thinking of the strawberry TikTok where you eventually progressively just lose the ability to pronounce the word strawberry.
Yeah.
Strawberry.
Your brain does that.
Because you're so tired. Yeah.
We're also in the middle of some studio updates that you can't see, but you'll probably hear and enjoy, like the improved viewership of them. There's like going to be some new lights that we've ordered and stuff like that that will make the studio brighter but not hotter. Yay, LED technology.
Yay.
Important.
Yay.
And new microphone, stuff like that. So very exciting. Not a huge difference for your point of view, friends, but your ears and your retinas will probably appreciate the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And-
so it'll be good.
And we appreciate all of our patrons.
Yes.
Our patrons.
Yes.
To make that happen.
We've been able to save up, and so it's very exciting to get all this stuff now. Now I just have to find the time to, like, now that we have the things, to put them up. So slowly but surely, Jason installed our new table last week. It's very exciting. And it fits in the corner, so it's not, like, so weird like it was. Those of you who know. So it's much more comfortable. Thank you. All right. And yeah, thank you to our amazing patrons. We really, really appreciate you. Indie Designer of the Month. Our September Indie Designer of the Month is Steve D. Him from 10 Star Games. You can find him on 10stargames.itch.io or 10stargames.com. This week we are discussing The Rent, an autobiographical solo game. It's supposed to be Rent.
Oh.
There's a typo. I corrected it. Yeah, Rent.
My bad.
Yes,
I'm so sorry.
like last year's Rent, except not a musical that I was obsessed with when I was young.
We were
in
all
the
obsessed with it
Me
because
too.
that was
Yeah.
the way.
Yeah, it was.
It was the theater kid way.
Yeah, it is not based on that musical. It's just called The Rent. It is an autobiographical solo game about the real face of poverty using tokens and principal components. This game is designed to simulate life in poverty or near poverty and how much joy is sacrificed just to get by. Even if you win, you lose a lot. This is a quote about it from boardgamegeek.com. I'm left in a more contemplative state. This is incredibly well done. Boardgamegeek.com. Safety warning: if you or someone you love has experienced this cycle, this game may be extremely emotional for you to play. Take steps to ensure you have self-care available before and after you play. And it is name your own price on tinstargames.itch.io. It seems like a very heavy game, but it seems like the comments and the reviews left of it are very good. So it could be something that is very cathartic or just interesting to kind of go through and see if that's something that you are interested in working through, if it's something you've experienced or something you're finding, a way to find empathy or things like that about that. But the components are also really neatly designed too. Everything about it looks like very well produced and well made. So
Wait,
it really
I'm
caught
sorry.
my eye. Also, just the cover of it is like someone like emptying their pocket, like just pulling out their jean pocket, and you're just like, I don't know. It just caught my eye. I was like, this is interesting. This is different than other things we've talked about.
It is. But,
So
but I'm sorry, go back for a second. Are you
Yeah.
telling me that playing games can help you build empathy for
Yes.
situations that you have not directly
It's
experienced?
amazing, right?
What? Yeah. Sounds sus.
Yeah. Especially solo games like this, because it's like also you can like experience and build empathy in that way that doesn't put anyone else possibly at the table at risk.
Mhm.
Like this is something where you could play it by yourself, and even if you haven't personally, not that this is most people, experienced poverty or like near poverty in your life, then you could build empathy for it without like taking the risk that someone else at the table might have had that experience. So you're not like LARPing their real life in front of them. So I think that's an interesting component to it, and I always appreciate a good little solo game, honestly.
That's nice. There's no scheduling involved. It's really
So
Just
yeah,
you. You just show up.
it's just me. I just sit there and I like print out some things, and like and just have a little game session. It feels like after all these years, like so many of my like games are like Happy Jacks based or on stream and things like that, and we do still off camera games sometimes, but I just feel like, especially with the kid now, I get less and less time for that. It's like if there's going to be a game, it has to be streamed so people can see it because we have to make content. And I love doing that, but it's also just nice to sometimes just have a game that's like super chill and just a little solo game by myself. Because gosh, my husband goes to bed early. I love him, but gosh dang it, it's like 9:30 and I'm like, I got like 4 more hours till I go to bed. Okay. Anyway, this is an overshare night for me. Sorry.
It's all good.
It's okay.
All right.
Okay.
Mailbag number 1. Someone else should talk for a while.
Okay, Pooja's between you and me.
Do you want to
Ready?
take this one? Go for it.
Sure, why not? Let me get there. I've got a kitty that really wants to get out, so that'll if you hear that in the background, I apologize in advance. Cats. All right, so hey,
Yay,
Happy Jacks.
cat ladies. Woohoo.
Yes, I'm a crazy cat lady. Will remain so
Yeah.
for the foreseeable future. So I've got it in front of me. Mailbag number 1. Hey, Happy Jacks crew. Recently, for me, on S34 episode 2, season 34, episode 2, the discussion of power differentials came up in regards to a superhero game, like the example of Green Lantern on a team with Catwoman. And I was wondering why this is such a hang-up for so many. I mean, I have friends that don't like it when Hawkeye's on a team with Thor, but like, that's just how comics work. Every character will have a role and need because the story always adjusts to spotlight each character's abilities. All of the noises are happening right now, but still, people seem to struggle with it, and I always wonder why. Is it just a case of I'm not into that type of story, or just a thing where they can suspend their disbelief for these types of stories? Like I think someone mentioned, well, Superman could clean up Gotham when in the comics he can't. He's been fear gassed by Scarecrow and mind controlled by Poison Ivy. Like the threat always adjusts for the hero for there to be a challenge. And that's so clearly a thing in TTRPGs too. So why is this still a struggle for folks? Yours, Jolene. P.S. Apparently, Kimmy, they're willing to talk to you whenever about DC Comics. So I'll hang out with those Superman thoughts.
Yes. Specifically calling for Superman movie thoughts. I have so many of those, but we'll wait till the end of this email. You know that, Jolene. You were just baiting me. I know it. I see you. I love you, but I see you.
It's like, if I just leave this trail of bait.
Yes. I
Yes.
know Kimmy will take it. And we'll get a 3-hour-long podcast episode about the
Just-
Snyder Justice League movies. And, oh, my God.
Aw.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, take it.
Aw.
Okay, so thoughts on this. I have lots of thoughts on this.
I
but
have lots of thoughts on this
Yeah.
myself.
There
But-
are many thoughts. All
Yeah.
of the thoughts.
Bridget, when are you to start?
So I want to start off with kind of setting up like a difference in medium. Because when we talk about power differentials and superhero teams in comics, it's a very different situation than the power differentials between your players who are playing superheroes at a TTRPG table.
Yeah.
And there are two reasons why I do that. Like, one, because in comics, like, there is a person writing this story who can tailor all the little things to the heroes and make sure that, like, each person, like, each character has their spotlight moment, and and technically your GM can to an extent do that in TTRPGs as well. What oftentimes I find breaks down in superhero TTRPGs is mechanics. When you have a massive power differential amongst your group of players, so amongst the team, the mechanics of the game very often do not support that particularly well. This is the thing that in Pinnacles that we ran into sometimes, where, like, we had somebody who could hit really, really, really hard, and also had really, really great defense.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they were a body, and that was their thing. But it did mean that none of the rest of the team could actually inflict damage on the villain, because if the villain was set up to be able to withstand hits from that person. We found ways around that, and there are creative ways to find that, like, around that at a lot of different tables.
Mhm.
But what can also often happen is if you end up with a character who has more support skills or is a Hawkeye to your Thor, where there are some overlapping situations there in terms of, like, attempting to actually do damage.
Yeah.
You have a player who really, really feels left out every time you get into combat.
Yeah.
And I think that that's why we talk about power differentials as massive power differentials as a negative for TTRPGs.
Yeah, I agree. I love comics, and I love the Trinity specifically, which is in DC, Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman together. Wonder Woman, obviously, the best of all those. But besides that most obvious thing ever, the reason they work is because you can have that suspension of disbelief in comic books, because just like other media, it's all written out, like you were saying. Like, there's no, like, you can make sure there's a role for Batman and his amazing brain and detective skills in the situation, and you know that Batman is going to recognize that and take that because you write him to do that.
Yeah.
Like, no matter what opportunities you give your players at the table as a GM, you're not 100% that they're going to pick up on them. In fact, most of the time they won't. I mean, not always, not most of the time, but
But
like,
a good portion of the time, like, you think something is really obvious, and the players are like, I don't know what you're talking about.
There's
Yes.
nothing I can
Like,
do
what is
here.
this?
Yeah. So I think that's the big, like, difference there. And having played a lot of Supers games, there are systems that are better about this than others. Like, Masks is a great example of this, because it isn't about necessarily how much damage you do when you punch people. So it is more about the emotional relationships between the characters. So when they get in a fight, it's more about what's happening between them, even more than what it is actually happening in the fight. But even in those situations, like, I've still played mask games that ended up feeling very like, okay, my character doesn't have a lot to do right now because of the powers I picked or something like that, or because I was this playbook. And it's not because of a flaw in how the game is necessarily designed, because it does a lot better job than a lot of Supers games. I think that's like Wild Talents, like calling out Wild Talents specifically. I've run a lot of Wild Talents, and it is really hard to make sure that game is completely balanced, because point buy systems where literally you have more powerful characters than others is going to, in most cases, leave less powerful characters, with less to do. even if they are, even if you are working really hard at it. I've accidentally run Wild Talents games at cons where suddenly I was like, oh, this power is great. This character is amazing. And then you're like, wow, this person has no idea how to use this character. And they just like, my character can't do anything right now. And you're just like, oh.
And it can also be like a situation where in comics, you never have the situation where somebody just rolls really badly 5 times in a row.
Yeah.
Like, and suddenly everything that they wanted to do has failed. Or in Wild Talents, gone last and therefore been useless.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so there are ways to work around this. Mass does it by shifting the focus. And I think one thing that Jason did really well was like have powers that affected the environment have an actual mechanical impact in fights.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really interesting and like kept people engaged in a situation where there was nothing direct they could do, but there were indirect things.
Yeah.
That they could do. And I've seen this happen in other Supers games too. And that's also like part of what it is in the comics. Part of what Batman is doing is like setting up Superman and Wonder Woman for like the perfect stray.
Yeah.
And it's cool and awesome when that happens, but it also takes a great deal of skill on both the GM and the player side.
Yeah. And just luck. Like literally just luck. Like you rolled well at this moment, everything went great. This like it just landed right where not like again, comics, I love comic books so much. But writing is different than RPG playing because all those multiple paths are taken out through your drafting process. You don't get multiple drafts. You don't get multiple ways to get it right in a TTRPG because it's live. It's right now. And it's just so easy for those dice and just the math, depending on what system you're using, to land in a way that, unless you're not doing fights. And this happens a lot with, I've seen it in so many systems too, with like Jedi, like Star Wars systems where it's like, oh, you're you're a smuggler, you're shoot first, ask questions later, tough guy. And then like a Jedi walks in and you're like, well, I was cool and now I can't. You just did all the things. Okay, well now I'm gonna stand here and look cool because that's what I'm best at, I guess now. There's just like
I'm pretty.
yeah, exactly. I'm pretty. Look at me, swashbuckling my hair in a swashbuckly way while you take out all the baddies. Cool. It's just like it's hard to do in any system where there is a character that is canonically like much more powerful. Like it's just hard when dice and math is somehow involved. So Vixie, I know we've been blathering on. Like what are your thoughts on this?
Oh no, I was listening to you guys talk because I have not had the pleasure of playing like a truly like super powers game like in the traditional DC comic sense. I was thinking of like Dungeons and Dragons. Which is because we talk about power. I've spoken to this a couple of times in Dungeons and Dragons, where a lot of people tend to lean towards the caster classes or the magical classes more than the martial classes because the martial classes just don't. They don't work. Especially like a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to play a monk. They can't do anything. They struggle. Or a fighter, same deal. Even despite the fact that they have some really cool things that they can do, it's just that when you compare it to something like Fireball, well. It's a really powerful differential. But then you have other classes like cleric, which are classically like more support. And if you don't understand that concept, you're always going to be disappointed. Because I do think there's this kind of like everybody wants to get that. How do you want to do this at the end, right? And if you don't get it, it can be really disappointing. But at the same time, I guess the way that I've always looked at it. Hello, cat. Yes, hi. Sorry, this is when being a cat lady gets me. Cats everywhere. But yeah, it's one of those situations where if you can't see the bigger picture, then you might actually be disappointed. I think. I hope that makes sense. Because whenever I I have a table and I play a cleric at the table. And usually the first thing that I do, there's my two things that I do, and that's usually summon my spiritual weapons. That's a bonus action, and cast Sacred Flames. That's a cantrip. So, take that, 2 spells at a time rule. So, but things like that, like knowing what to do right away, helps me set up. Like now I have something that I can attack with, and I'm free to cast as many support spells as I want. So I can do stuff like Healing Word. I can do stuff like, I'm trying to think of any other spells but stuff like that. Like I'm free to like that. I now have an action and like an automatic attack. So I never feel like I'm not doing anything in terms of like combat mechanics. But that's a way that I work around that feeling. If you're a monk, which I've also played a monk in a party with a bunch of casters, that's a little bit harder to do, I think, because you're so much more physical and you have to like get in there and throw that punch. And if someone burns the thing to a crisp before you can do anything, you're kind of left holding the bag like, well, I'm just here to look pretty.
I mean, looking pretty is very important.
It serves a vital function in every party.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the thing, right? Like, I think everyone has been in that situation where, like, especially as you get into higher level D&D, you're like, cool. The sorcerer just took out the basilisk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Gun hand.
Although,
Fire fingers. What do they call them? I don't know.
like
and
great.
when we played Alligator Adventures in when Darby played Connie, one of her favorite spells was the sleep spell, and that would just knock out half of our enemies, and we're like, cool, we're done, bye.
Yeah. I mean, it just gets where in a lot of systems when, you get to a certain level, certain classes or things are just OP and you're just like, okay. And I mean, it's, the age-old problem in video games too. Like, certain, like, and there's always, like, as someone who spent too many years of my life in, like, a serious raiding guild, like that you had to have a certain makeup of certain certain things and certain builds, or you could not beat those raids because that was what it was optimized for. And because of those damage maximizations and things like that, it becomes really hard just because of the math to make something feel the same for everyone. I mean, we've gotten so many emails over the years of people who are like, well, I made my character because it's what made sense as my character, but someone else in the group is really mad because I didn't min-max them, or someone in our party min-maxed themselves and the rest of us are playing the character and they're just overpowered now and it's like unbalanced because math is hard, and it's hard to have that experience where different characters can just dominate what is essentially a combat heavy game in most cases, at least for superpowers or in superpower settings. Like, fights are a big part of it. It's a really big part of the comic too. So while you can write, Catwoman sneaking around the side and like stealing the thing, it's going to succeed because you're writing and drawing it in the comic book. Again, it feels really bad when everybody else is in the fight in a TTRPG and Green Lantern is like taking on this army and Catwoman's sneaking off to the side and then like trips because she rolled badly or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Or just can't get to the thing or gets hit by something else in between. And then they can't do anything, and then like their essential complete purpose is null and void, and then it's just not fun anymore. It feels it's a big letdown.
And then on the flip side of that, like, because we've been talking a lot about how cool it is, like, when you have this powered character and everything. But, like, the other side of that is if your GM is focusing more on, like, scaling things for the other people at the table, then you end up with, the character who's, like, put all their points, like, the player who's put all their points into these skills and other stuff, and they're like, cool, do I have anything to punch? Because if I'm not punching something, I'm really bad at life.
Yeah.
And that's not, like, to say that that's wrong, but it's that balance. It's both sides of it. Because if you end up with a game where, like, somebody is really excited to punch things, and they make a character who's good at punching things, and like punching being a euphemism for any kind of
Yeah,
like
yeah.
attack power, right?
Yeah.
And then and then you have other people at the table who have made characters who are more about like the other kinds of plots, like sneaking around and doing heists, or somebody who's really into like political stuff. Like that's where session zeros and setting expectations for your campaign can really really be great, because that way you're all going into the same game
Mhm.
and the same
Yes.
type of comic book
Innovations.
story.
Yeah. Well, and even then, like as long as everybody knows that they're going to get their moment in the spotlight, they don't have to necessarily be equal. I think when you start running into that problem is when the best moments of the campaign are those fight scenes. And I think this is another reason masks and more narrative focused games, like I really love, there's some like Star Wars esque serial numbers like scratched off versions that are like PBTA and a couple other more narrative games. I much prefer those to like Edge of the Empire and those games, just because those are so crunchy with their talent trees and stuff. And I played a bunch of it, and I liked some of the elements of that. But again, like when you got to fights, unless you were all sort of similarly classed, um, it just like, yeah, Jedi walks in and like it takes a really long time to become a Jedi in that system, but once you do, you just like zoom, and like everyone else is like, ah. But that's like our new symbol for like, yeah, just point
For
at the
looking
camera.
pretty.
Yeah, looking pretty.
Yeah, like looking pretty.
Cool point. Yeah. But I think masks and a lot more narrative games do a good job because they put they literally force the focus. It's not just relying on the GM to do it. It forces the focus on those more interactive moments. Like you can't really play Mask with Fidelity and not have scenes where the teenagers are yelling at each other or confessing feelings for each other, or like the
Or
system
yelling and confessing feelings at each
or
other at the
both.
same
Yeah.
time.
at the same time. It's like a forced piece of the game, which is great because you can be like the Beacon, who is like the Hawkeye-esque or whatever it is, and like not have a whole bunch of powers and be next to, the Bull or something like that, who has a lot of powers, or, all of those, and you still have those important moments, because there's important moments when you're at school and you have to be normal and you're really good at being normal, and the superpower one, might not be good at being normal. So it forces those scenes where everything is important, which is akin to what comic books do, because comic books do that too. While they can kind of like fudge things a little bit with like, Batman taking out a bunch of people in this fight next to Wonder Woman, yeah, that would happen. Go read the Hikatea. She kicks his ass. It's amazing. But like, yeah, I think that has to be a component, whether it's built into the system or if you're just running the game. You have to force that spotlight into those scenes where other character types can shine, even if you're playing something more akin to Wild Talents or D&D or Champions or Savage Worlds that don't necessarily lend themselves specifically to those types of scenes. That's something you really have to, honestly, I believe, to get a true comic book vibe with your game, really like force those moments.
And just
Yeah,
to have
I
a
think
nice,
that's-
like, well-balanced game in general.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Vixie.
Yeah. No, that's okay. I was just gonna say, as the GM, you have the unique advantage of like knowing what all of these characters are and can do, and like sometimes the games, like more of the PBTA games, tend to let you build relationships ahead of time. So like Monster of the Week, you all decide how you're interconnected and stuff, things like that. But also like as the GM, you know like who can do what. So if you know like whose strengths and weaknesses lie where, you can kind of build the story around that to, again, like make those spotlight moments happen, so that everybody gets their chance to sort of shine and feel special.
Yeah.
So.
And it's so great. It like feels really good when you get those kinds of like balancing moments, not just for superhero campaigns, but also like when you're able to have that kind of ebb and flow. So in D&D 2 or other games that are like crunchier in combat, where like you could have an entire session that is like a fight or most of a fight. And so having those like narrative and roleplay beats afterwards and between fights be just as important as the fights is it's just really nice as like players and on a GM side, like for you all to have a really like different kind of experience that can be satisfying for all of your players in a different way.
Mhm.
And so much less keeping track of things. So much less math involved.
So much. We love math, but math also can sometimes be the enemy when you're trying to make an equitable experience for everyone at the table that isn't about just pure power equity. If that makes sense?
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So math is unforgiving. It is very rigid, and so when you need wiggly moments, math is not always the best go-to for that.
No. I will point out as a point of note, I always think whenever everyone starts talking trash about Batman, I always point out that one Justice League episode where he single-handedly defeated every member of the Justice League.
Yes.
The man is prepared to the point of insanity.
Yes.
He's like, I know how to kill all of you, just in case y'all go nuts. Even me.
I counter your he single-handedly defeated all the Justice League with the episode where someone stole his file on all of the Justice League members' weaknesses and beat them all because he had not, like protected his information well enough.
Yes.
You couldn't encrypt it, dude.
Like,
Fix me a problem.
this
Yeah.
doesn't like you couldn't have committed that shit to memory and then just like burned it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's I love all of them so much, but I love Batman when he's written well, and he's very often not written well, especially
Yeah.
when it comes to like movies and most TV is not written well. The animated series got him really, really well, and I feel like they did really well with him in Batman Beyond.
I was about to say Batman
yeah.
Beyond also got it right.
Batman Beyond.
Yeah, I
Ugh.
love that. I think that's partially just my age, but also one of the interesting things about the Hikatea, which is a graphic novel that is about Wonder Woman and him, they're struggling, and he uses like some because she's in her role as the Themysciran ambassador to the UN in most of the book, and she is protecting this woman who has committed a crime, and so is technically like needs to be held accountable for her crime, but Diana believes in the reason she committed the crime, and like she swears an oath to protect the girl. So she and Batman are both doing what they think is right through the whole thing. It's really, really well written and really interesting about like what is morally right and what society holds right. And it's just a fantastic graphic novel, which is also beautifully drawn, has some of the best images ever. And if you've I'm sure you've seen it. It's the classic cover that is Wonder Woman's boot on the side of Batman's face with his and his cowl on the ground. It's just it's just a really great graphic novel that really nails both characters. I think it does a great service to both of them about their strengths, their intelligences, and isn't just about them fighting. It's about like their convictions and their beliefs as people. And it's Chef's Kiss, one of the best graphic novels of all time. It's a classic. And yeah, so I think they're both sadly badly written, and Superman too. I think a lot of times people don't quite get the characters when they read them, or they want to do a new take on them, and then it ends up just kind of like missing the point of them. So
Yeah.
I don't know. That's my feeling. Someday I'll be a bazillionaire and I'll be able to make all the movies the right way. That'll be my goal in life, other than all my other goals. That's what I'll do. I'll sell 1 million copies of Starscape, maybe 5 million copies of Starscape, to make enough money to make the DC movies that I want. And I don't know. This is a terrible business plan.
It's definitely going to happen.
Yes.
You have to
Believe.
believe in yourself.
I believe in it. I believe that I will become the first TTRPG billionaire. No, because that would take so much unethical. I can't be a billionaire. I mean, my guilt would be in the way way too soon. I'd be able to build a bunch of schools long before I became a billionaire, and that's fine with it. But yeah, I will also go off on the movies. There's the most Superman movies, and I know we've talked about this before, friends. Sorry. Superman movies get it wrong because they focus too much on everything else, especially the Snyder movies. Like Snyder specifically talked about how he didn't like Superman. So I don't know why they were like, hey, he's the guy. I know this Randy an asshole, like, will be the person who gets Superman. Yeah. So Superman is who he is. Like there's a whole bunch of moments and there's a bunch of iterations of Jonathan Kent. But the core values that Jonathan Kent instills and Martha Kent together instill in Clark Kent, Superman, are the core of who he is. And the kind of Achilles heel of Superman are the things he can't stop because he is so powerful. And they tried to do a shorthand of this in Man of Steel, where for whatever reason, Jonathan Kent was like, no, don't save me from the tornado, and like dies right in front of Clark, like in a way that was really ridiculous and badly done, because you're like, Clark could save you.
And no one can
And
see.
no one could see him.
No one can see because it's a tornado, so no one is here.
Yeah, and also he can
Yeah.
move that fast and like whatever. Like, okay, it's ridiculous. But in most comic book iterations, Jonathan Kent dies from like a heart attack.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that Superman can't stop. And it's like those moments where he just like, there are things I can't do, people I can't save because it's beyond even my power. So he like stays in touch with his humanity that way. And I think
Right.
that's really, really important to that character. Like, that's honest, like, this is not who I want to be. I am this because I feel like I have an obligation to do this. If I could, I would just be Clark Kent and write newspaper articles and maybe go for flying because that's fun. But like that would be what he did. And he's not out for vengeance like Batman is. He's not motivated by changing the world necessarily the same way Wonder Woman is. He's like, I'm doing this because it's the right thing to do. And that is literally the core of Superman. And it's very simple, and it's something a lot of people get wrong. But he's like, I don't know, like if all these characters had TED Talks, Batman's would be very complicated with like large PowerPoint presentations about the, how he would go through things and the process.
Batman's would have spreadsheets.
Yeah, spreadsheets involved, and like this is the exact power differential. This is how I will change all of the things in Gotham. Wonder Woman's, I feel, would be very like, how are you feeling? How's everyone feeling today? Okay, like very like vibes based. And Superman's would be just like, hi, I do what I need to do. And he'd like just him like walking on a very simple stage, like, yeah, I do this because I want to do what's right. And it's my job, since I have the power to change something, I want to change something. And that's like what his TED Talk would be. His would be like the super simple one. And like,
I mean, the thing about like, I think one of the things that people get really wrong about Superman is that he does not want to be a god.
Mm-mm.
He does not see himself as a god.
No.
He sees himself as a person with a lot of power.
Mhm.
And that in a lot of like weird ways, or not weird, but like in a lot of ways, like the way Superman sees himself and the way that like Peter Parker, Spider-Man are presented is they both have that core of with great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
And that has been instilled in both of them. And they both go through their moments where, like on vastly different scales, but that they are struggling to do the right thing every time. And oftentimes seeing that like there is no one right way to do it. There is no one right choice to make. And there's huge emotional beats come from not being able to always be the person who saves the day.
Mhm.
In a way that, like, it's not like some of like Batman's best beats come from his flirtation with darkness
Mm-hmm.
and him being seduced by like the idea of this power and just like making people be the way he wants them to be.
Mm-hmm.
But those aren't Superman's strongest beats because he could just do those things.
Mm-hmm.
So his strongest beats come from that tension between knowing what he wants the world to look like and also knowing that like that's just not who he is as a person.
Right. Well, and also like both have suffered loss, but while Batman is kind of out for vengeance, Superman can't do anything about his loss. Like his people are gone, depending on what comics you read. Like it gets complicated, but for the most part, like his planet's destroyed as far as he knows for most of his life until his cousin shows up and some bad guys, and depending on what you're reading, like he has this immeasurable loss that he was too young to really feel, but like that is always kind of alone with him. Like he's got that survivor's guilt complex a little bit about, hey, I'm the only one left. Like, and in that is kind of also wrapped in his behavior. Like he wants to be the best also for the memory of his family. Like he's trying to live up to like what he feels is expected as the last Kryptonian, and what his, you know, what his family has left behind, also depending on what you've read or watched, like as far as messages and expectations, and like you were the last person of this amazing great civilization, don't fuck up like that. You're much less likely to get a tattoo or knock up your, you know, teen girlfriend or something like that if you feel like the honor of an entire civilization is riding on your behavior. Honestly, I feel
Here's to generational trauma.
yeah, basically, yeah.
Yeah,
And it
this
is
fine.
You know, and I think that's an important thing, and it's I mean, it's something we see in real people, like when they feel like that they need to represent their family or their civilization or their culture or their ethnicity or something like that, you know. And I feel like that's something that is echoed in some ways very honestly in many versions of Superman, where he wants to be the best because he represents them, to even if the world doesn't really know who he is and as Clark Kent, which is why he's allowed to be a little more normal as Clark Kent. As Superman, he very much feels the pressure of the symbol that he is versus who he really is inside. And I could literally talk about this for hours. I can't even tell you how many times my husband and I go on dates, and most of the date ends up being conversations about this. Honestly, Superman.
I'm just
few
saying
weeks ago.
that like we have a great series on Patreon.
Yeah.
For people who are patrons of Happy Jacks RPG called Nerding Out.
Yes.
And
Which we're a little
usually-
behind on. We need to catch
It
up.
usually is all stuff that like we nerd out with that we love,
Special interest. Yay.
but also ranting.
Yes, total ranting. Like this is a good example. I should, when we run behind on them, like, because it's hard to schedule them sometimes, I should just do them by myself. Like today, it will be 3 hours of Kimmy talking about this one random thing in comic books. Welcome. You'll get better content when we can schedule it. Till then, suffer through it.
Welcome
What a TED
welcome
Talk.
to the Kimmy Hour.
Yeah, this is Kimmy's Corner, where I talk about whatever for 3 hours.
I do want to point out though, like in this whole conversation, the focus is not on Superman's ability to fight. Like we all mutually understand that Superman can kick ass if he wants to. The interest comes from his story
Mhm.
and how he handles that power. And I think that's something that you can actually incorporate into like part of the answer of this email as well. We mentioned somebody, I think Pooja, you mentioned min-maxing earlier, and like how some people really are like, oh, you have to optimize your character and make them like super perfect. And it's funny
Oh,
because
yeah,
I was at
Kimmy
a
was
table with
talking about that.
like that once, and it was really interesting because I'm very narrative forward. So I'm not the person that's going to optimize their character. I'm going to pick what makes sense for the character narratively. And this is because this was like my first D&D game. I didn't know what I was doing. And this person was like, oh, you have to optimize your character so they can be like super awesome. The character is a writer. They use language a lot. And I really wanted to pick up linguist feat. And they pretty much turned to me and said, oh, that's the most useless feat in the game. You can't do that. That's not useful at all. You have to choose this.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, okay, I guess.
Nope.
Let me take away from my character story because this feat is more useful than this feat. And I don't think that's helpful to the game because it's collaborative storytelling. So what's the point? You know what I mean? If I wanted to min-max, I'd go play a video game and just
Yeah.
use the cheat codes. Like, you know, the old Final Fantasy where you get like the cheat codes and you put them in so you'd never die.
Yeah.
You just
Or in
have
Doom,
you just
God mode on
find
Doom.
like you just find that beach with all the whales that you can use level 5 death on, and then like stay there for the next 4
Done.
hours leveling up your characters.
Yeah.
Done. Exactly.
Oh my God.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
When I played Ultima Online, you could
Mhm.
like do code, like put in like basically like codes that would run the same sequence of commands over and over and over. And you could the trick was you'd park yourself out, you'd tame a dragon, you'd go park it out on a boat, you'd go and park on yourself on a boat just far enough away that the dragon couldn't attack you, and then you would like do attacks on it, and you just bought those attacks and leave it for like overnight, and you'd wake up the next morning like maxed out. It was really bad. You never did it for your first character, but like on your like 10th character, you're like, okay, I've done this. I can just do this. And you just hoped that like because it was back in the day where like game masters were actually people who walked around the game and they could see weird things happening, and sometimes we go check out what they were. You just really hoped that you didn't get found by a game master out in the middle of the ocean, which you sometimes did, because then they'd ban your account and you would be doomed forever. But
Oh no.
back in the day.
Oh,
All right.
the old days.
The olden days. I mean, it really was the olden days. But okay. An hour in. We've talked a lot about comic books, so I'm happy. But mailbag 2. I think this one is for you, Pooja.
Okay. Dear Empress Kimmy and her Jack of Court, although the last 2 emails I have sent, Kimmy hasn't been on it. Well, you get the idea.
Well,
Last night, I finished a 2.5-year-long campaign. I ran my players from level 5 to 20 in D&D 5e.
Whoa.
Well,
nicely done.
my 5e, which is really an abomination, but I digress. Anyway,
I think
this
that's
was
everybody.
the longest game I have ever run. All the players had epic arcs, and in the end, they all walked into the pantheon of my world as gods, and to being my future NPCs. Was the over 2.5 years of game all butterflies and rainbows? Not even a little bit. We had to have the dreaded adult conversation more than a few times, and with more than a few players. We even had to kick out a player. It was kind of a lot. But it was all worth it and amazing, and we're still friends after.
Oh, that means you did a good job of it.
Mm-hmm. Why am I even sending this email then? 1, basically, I just want to brag that I got to finish a long-form campaign for the first time.
Woo!
Yay! The far more important part, I also wanted to let other people know that no game is perfect, and even if you're having some problems, you might be able to fix it and still have a wonderful experience. But I guess I need a question too, so how about this? What was the worst thing that happened in a campaign you were in that you were able to recover from and still end well with everyone still friends and had fun? Yes, I know that last sentence is poorly worded, but it's 1 a.m. I can't think it through. We won't say anything.
No.
Virk from DC. P.S. Drink.
Huzzah.
P.P.S. Join the
Just
Discord.
finish
P.S.S. Send in emails.
Woohoo.
I
That's a hard question.
mean, I've had bad experiences, but none of them have ended well. Happy ending. Like the happy ending was me leaving the table.
Different kind of happy ending.
I mean, I have an instance. It wasn't like the worst though. It was just like I mean, I think when we first started are the official Aldgate Adventures campaign, the table was getting used to each other. And I know like after episode one, we all had to sit down and have like a conversation and be like, hey, let's like sort this through. And we did. And like we were able to really come together and like gel after that. And
Yeah.
like like we were able to like really have like a great game and a great like we had fun doing the campaign, which was the big thing. So I guess that would be like my one example of that.
Yeah.
I think that's a
But
really
that
good
everyone at the table
example.
is wonderful. So I mean, we and like everybody at the table is like is just they're so empathetic. Everybody's so kind and understanding, and like we're able to like sit there and talk about things, and discuss them like adults, which
Mhm.
is really really nice. It's always wonderful when you have a wonderful table to work
I mean,
with.
that's the thing too, is like I think a thing that we oftentimes like can lose sight of when we're going through bad times at a TTRPG table is these people are all our friends
Mhm.
and we
Yes.
want to get along with them and we want to have a good time with them.
Yeah.
And like even though they're acting like kind of a jackass, like that's not that we know that there is something beyond that.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I was yeah, I was really proud of you actually in Allgate because it is like it is a little interesting because a lot of times for uh some of the APs on here, like they end up with people who don't know each other or newer people to the thing. So it's like for Allgate Adventures, you weren't really friends yet, some of you. Like some of you were friends, but it is a little bit sometimes of that, hey, get to know each other. You do kind of like a little chatting and a little off camera session zero basic stuff. You do like your lines of veils, but it is sometimes a little bit more of the experience of when you go meet a gaming group at a con or a gaming or a gaming store or whatever, because you aren't all necessarily best friends. Sometimes you are, like sometimes after you get to know and you've been around a while. Um, but like Artem and you were kind of new, and that was your both of your first game, other than like your one shots, which are kind of like our testing
Yes.
grounds. And
Mm-hmm.
then like we've known Brian for forever, but he was new to that
Mm-hmm.
table. And Brian
Yes.
and Ingy have been friends for forever, but never in a game together and not streamed. So it was a very new table for all of that. So I was really proud. As Mama Bear here, I have to like kind of herd the cats and like herd the players and sometimes be like, okay, let's all have a meeting together about this game. What do we want to do? And it was really nice that you were all able to kind of do that without Mama Bear in the room and be
Yeah.
successful with it. Because oftentimes for those conversations, like we do say, oh, have the adult conversation a lot, but it's something we also like practice behind the cameras here. It's something we really believe in. But having those conversations often with someone else there who's not directly involved can be really helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So I get to do that. Yeah, I'm the one who does that a lot, and so it's always nice though when a group can kind of find that and gel on their own because I feel like I don't know. I just feel like there's a better chance of it working if it comes like kind of naturally with them. I also like had to have serious talks with you multiple times about your mic discipline because you were all so funny and you all kept talking at the same time, and I had to be like, for the love of everything on the soundboard, please, all of you, stop making funny jokes all at the same time. Like, pause. Each one of you take a joke moment. Like, it was hilarious because you were all having so much fun after your adult conversation that I kept getting annoyed when I was like doing the audio. Like, God, you're all funny and we can't hear any of you. Take turns being funny.
Yes.
It's a great problem
Um,
to have.
mhm.
Oh, that's
I like
lovely.
like I really think it depends on like the table and the situation.
Yeah.
Um, you know how that turns out. Like I said, Aldgate was just a great table. Like everyone was really understanding and empathetic and willing to like, what can we do to make this work and have everybody have fun? And it all worked out for that. So
That's
yeah,
fantastic.
but I love the Aldgate crew with all my heart. So
Yeah.
I'll never shut up about them.
I would say I was in a campaign once where inadvertently the GM had made like a major plot point around something that ended up being a trigger for one of the players.
Mm.
And And we weren't aware it was, like a home game situation, so things weren't as like formalized, and there wasn't like a here, fill out all your lines and veils. It was more like we're gonna use safety tools in the moment situation. And so somebody at the table ended up getting like, well, very triggered and very upset and had to leave. And so we had a conversation afterwards. Like, obviously, we stopped playing that day, but there was a conversation between sessions, and it was a situation in which, like, the plot point inadvertently mirrored a real life situation for that person incredibly closely. Like, one was a fantasy setup and one was not, but like other than that, there were a lot of like similar beats. And we just rewound back, and the GM like just changed like a full set of plot points in between sessions, and we moved forward as a table.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think that like having that conversation allowed us to articulate a lot more about like what our lines could be and be more forward about like okay, here are things we can't include, not to ruin anyone's fun, but so that this doesn't happen again.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just a really shining example of like care taken for people at the table
Mm-hmm.
in a home
Right.
game environment, which is not always the case.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you can end up with that pressure of, oh, well, we're all friends, so you know that we don't mean it that way.
Yeah.
And it was nice to have a situation in which we didn't. Like, where it was like, no, you're my friend, so I don't want you to feel bad.
Yeah.
And honestly, like, it could so easily have gone the other way.
Yeah.
Like, it could have been like, so often, and I've seen this too, that it's just like, yeah, but it's just in the game, so you need to get over it.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Proud of younger us.
Yeah. I have one that it's one of my only examples of us like going on to play. It didn't end happy for everyone at the table. It was not a Happy Jacks game, but after I first started gaming with Happy Jacks, I got interested in gaming, so I started gaming with other groups of people too. This was at like a friend's game. There was someone playing in the game who was playing. We were doing a great job. His significant other found out that a girl was playing in the game and got like upset that he was spending like one night a week with another woman with like 4 other guys sitting around. I don't know. And also this was like a really long time ago. This was like 13, 14, something like that. 13 years ago. However long Happy Jacks has been around. It's like around that. And so I was still kind of new to all this too. And so she decided to join the game. And it was fine. It was great. And it was like, it was great. And then they broke up and we're still in the game together. And it became a thing where it's like their characters would start yelling at each other about stuff that was like, not like it was like very thinly veiled, like awkward, like, wow, I don't think your characters suit. Okay, cool. I'm gonna go find chips in the other room or something. And so yeah, eventually I think she stopped coming. She was like, I don't know. I don't remember. It's been so long ago. I can't remember how that exactly went down. I think she just like sent us an email like, hey, it's been nice. I'm not going to come anymore. Like it wasn't even like a big like final fight or something that they had in front of us, at least that I know of, because it wasn't in front of us if there was one. But it was just like 3 or 4 sessions of like, awkward. We like you both. We don't want to kick either one of you out, but this isn't going to be our decision. Like it was just like awkward. The most awkward. And then it was like, okay, we kept playing, and yeah, it was fine. We continued playing, and it was fine after that. And it was just like this awkward thing that kind of became an inside joke for a while. Whenever any of us like dated, and they're like, they're not allowed to come in the game because then if you break up, you're gonna have to deal with it. which was very funny. And still to this day, we kind of joke about it sometimes, even though I think all of us are like permanently attached to our significant others at this point. Not that we had the same ones back then, but yeah. Anyway, that was my weird, almost kind of bad story that then like got a little better, but I can't say it's through any of our like adult actions or good choices. It was just like,
You know, that woman made a good choice for herself.
she did.
and it ripple affected
Yes.
through everyone.
It did. And I was like, and I never really got to know her super well. And I was like, been friends with, yeah. And it was just like one of those strange situations. It's like, we really honestly did enjoy playing with both of them. We just didn't enjoy playing with them together anymore. And we weren't going to make that choice. So eventually one of them did, which was nice. I feel like we probably would have eventually done something because it was getting kind of bad. Like, oh, it was really bad. I feel like there was one argument that like, I don't know, it started over something like after a fight, we were looting something very ridiculous. That was like I don't know, one of the stereotypes of what people argue over. Like, I want that piece of loot. No, I want that piece of loot. Let's roll for it or whatever it is. And like, it just, their characters started yelling at each other. And then they just started like yelling at each other in character about things that happened in their real relationship, but like vaguely made into a fantasy world. Like, you never clean the dishes and stuff like that. And we were just like, and we're all out. You guys can... And then it just dissolved into them just yelling at each other. And so we all just like hung out like in the front yard drinking for a while until they got quiet again. And we're like, hey, okay, we're gonna go. Bye, friends. And the poor guy who's like the GM, it was his house. He's like sitting out in the front yard.
He's like, I can't go anywhere.
He's like, you cannot leave. You cannot leave me with them. I'm not going to stay. And none of us, we were still young. Like, he was renting the house, and like his other roommate was also in the game. He was out front. Like, it was just one of those, yeah, like, we're like early teens. We didn't know, or early 20s. Yeah. We didn't know what to do and be adults about things. We were still pretending to be adults in every aspect of our lives. And like, we were very proud.
Most of them.
Yeah. It's like, no, we did not.
Just like, I can't leave.
Yeah.
I'm stuck here.
Yeah. You were not leaving me here with them. You were not allowed to leave. Plus, I think one of them was like parked behind me, and like, so I really couldn't have left. It was just like the most awkward situation. But luckily, we had beer and like a chill front yard to be in, so that was cool. It ended up being a fun campaign though, so go that.
But yes.
I feel like I probably should think of a story that has like a good moral to it, but that's the only one I can think of at the moment.
That's a good one though.
Yeah,
that's like, a good one.
Because
it all did turn out fine.
It did. No, yeah, no, I mean,
ultimately.
And I feel like that's something that ends up being pretty common too. Like, I know I've been the person who's like had a breakup and like, nope, too bad. You were never allowed back on a Happy Jack show ever again. Goodbye. Usually they got invited. Back in the day, they got invited because they were my boyfriend, and then it was like...
That's... Yeah. I will admit when I was, like, dating people or whatever, it was very much like, oh, we're broken up now. Great. Dead to me.
Yeah. I'm kind of like that, too. I'm like, why? Why would I hang out with you? If I didn't want to date you anymore,
then why do I want to be around you?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I don't half-heartedly. I'm not a halves person. It's like I like you or I don't think about you at all. Like, those are my extremes.
And I never want to think about you
again. Yeah, exactly. So, or I will just make fun of you and call you Chad for the next 13 years on a podcast, and you will have no idea. Anyway.
I mean, hey, writing songs about their exes works for Taylor Swift, so here we are.
Yeah, This is my golden podcast content. If you're a new listener, you're like, I've never heard an episode about Chad. Don't wait.
Don't worry about it.
Don't
worry about it.
Yeah,
don't worry about it.
All right, mailbag number 3. Like, this is great content. Oh, dear. This is French. Salut les héros.
Salut les héros Jacques et Jacqueline.
Cool. Yeah, that.
Yes.
I didn't take French in high school. It was optional, and I was like, why would I need French in Southern California? So I took Spanish.
I grew up in South Louisiana.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So, salut les héros Jacques et Jacqueline. I think.
Yes.
I don't know. I've been on her for like 20
I'm
years.
guessing that's something about hello, happy Jacks and Jacqueline's. Something.
Yay.
Yay. I have been listening to the show for a real long time. Oh, sorry. This is from the archive 2017. And I've even wrote an email or two over the years. Today, I'm writing again about some things I'd like to try in my next D&D 5e game, Under a Dark Sun. These days, I've mostly been playing indie games, and when friends I haven't played with in a long time asked me to run a D&D game for them, I couldn't resist, bringing some of the things I've learned from the hippie side of gaming. I'd like to have your thoughts on one of them, playing with time in the narration of the game. Hope I'm being clear enough for you to understand, as English is not my first language. Doing great, friend. Let's get
Better
to the
than we
point.
did with French.
Yeah, 100%.
Yes.
Much better than we did with the French. I'm thinking of using techniques like flash forward and flash back in the game. The campaign will be set in Athos, in the world of the Dark Sun campaign setting. Players will begin with a character just before the fall of Tyr. They will have to choose their sides in the conflicts that will shake the region, and so on. As I know they love to explore myths and legends, old ruins, and such in every campaign we've played together, they will soon come across ruins of a city buried in the sand. At that point, they will make a second team of characters from the time when the city was still in its golden age. Ooh. Then we will play the scenes in the past and the scenes in the present, switching characters. I think I'll try to give them control over this. Say they visit an oasis in the present time, but the writings in the wall of a cave are too old to read. And then they can decide to switch to their past characters and go to the same location and try and get access to the cave. What would you want to do as a player? Be able to decide when we switch time periods, or let the GM decide? Keep up the good work. You're on your 20th season. My own podcast will begin its 4th in September, and I can only hope that we last as long as you, or be half as good as you are. Julian from Paris, France. P.S. When I first started listening to Happy Jack's RPG podcast, craft beer was still in its infancy in France, but now we have pretty good IPAs over here. Beware, California. As you've learned winemaking, we have learned to craft beer.
Guess we're going to France for some craft beer, huh?
Right? All right. This is actually a very cool idea.
It is. It sounds, on the surface, it sounds a little complex, but this is coming from me who loves using stuff like flashbacks. That's been a thing for me lately. But I really think it depends on how you want to do it. So in a way that isn't that doesn't become overwhelming for you as the GM or you as the players. Because I could see that getting kind of crazy really quickly. Because you don't want to switch it. You don't want to flip flop. I'm worried that it'll become you're changing every 5 minutes because you keep encountering things that can only be understood in a specific section. But I also think that the best ways that I could think of off the top of my head to go about it would be either treat it like a wild magic thing, where it just randomly happens and you roll a die, and maybe if you roll a specific number above or below, now you're in this and you're having this sort of flashback. Or as the GM, if there's something specifically that needs to be seen in this time frame or something like that, because you're the one who's got the backbone of the narrative in front of you, that might be a good time to have them experience a flashback and then come back to themselves. But I do think it's important to establish which is serving which. Are you going to the past, and is that going to serve how is that going to serve the present narrative, or is the present narrative serving the narrative of the past? Which direction do you want to go, so that because that'll determine how important it is to be in either space.
Yeah.
I think.
I
hope that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it
No,
does.
it makes perfect sense.
I think my question about it is how does switching to the past? I love the idea so much. I love everything about it. The only question for me is if they need information, if the characters in the present need information off the tablet that they can't read anymore, I think kind of what you were getting at, how does going back to the past give them that information? Yes, the players get it from their past characters, but how do their present characters then get it?
I guess, I mean, maybe I'm reading things into this that aren't that aren't actually in the email, but it seemed like the basis of this is kind of like a past lives
Okay.
getting of information. In which case, the point of like which of these narratives, like the past or the present, is the one, like that is a major question that you have to answer. And if it is the present, then I think for me as a player, yes, being able to decide at least sometimes when I would go back into the past and connect with my past life would be important.
Mm-hmm.
But also that I want a mechanism. I want a
Yeah.
trigger
Yeah.
that would, in a good way, a trigger in a good way,
Yeah.
that would lead to these moments to
Yeah.
make them feel important. Because otherwise, then it's just like a, like, press back and A at the same time, and you have gone into the past.
Mm-hmm.
And, like,
Right.
that feels less satisfying than, like, there being a narrative reason and a, like, or even a mechanical reason that it's like, okay, I'm going to cast the spell now, or I'm going to, like, have it be a thing
Mm-hmm.
where I take control of my past self in order to get information that I need now, which like is such a cool mechanic.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Yes.
Like the Assassin's Creed games are kind of based on this. It's like people in the present are looking for information from the past so that someone is going through this technology into their past lives, or at least it starts that way. And then it gets a little convoluted. But the present day stuff is always my least favorite stuff, because why would you be like random person in a modern like facility when you could be cool people in periods of the past? But that I do love that concept of being able to jump into a past life and retain the information. And I 100% agree with you. I feel like there needs to be something that they do in the present characters do to make that happen. I kind of love the idea of having it be a mix, though. Like, you choose when you go back. Maybe the GM chooses how long you get to stay.
Oh yeah.
Like,
that would be great.
Yeah, I think
Or
something like
randomized
that.
with dice roll, like, you know, you roll a specific die and that decides how long you get you're there.
Right,
But,
Mhm.
right. Yeah, I think that's a very cool thing too, because it's also a little less fun if you get to choose. Oh, I jump now, I get the perfect amount of information, and then I jump back at the perfect moment. It's like, no, there's got to be
Yeah.
some sort of danger or risk involved in that, or you have to be careful not to
Exactly.
change the past too much or something. Like, I love stories about that too. It's like, okay, you have to get the information, but in a subtle way that doesn't change the past. I've been listening and reading a lot of time travel books lately, and I've been
Mhm.
very into how people do that, and they become part of the time period they can't as much as they can to get the information or whatever they want to do while they're there before coming back, and not like foobarring the entire timeline and making it so they were never born and nobody was born and all that stuff, because like the butterfly effect and all that.
Yeah.
So I love those ideas. I also caution you that like your players could fall in love with the other set of characters and want to be them a lot, because I feel like that's what I would do. Because if I got the choice, even like in a cool magical fantasy setting, if I got to be in like this awesome cool ancient setting, like of like, I don't know, like
I mean, both settings are awesome and cool in
Yeah.
this
Yes.
theoretical situation.
right, but
Here's
like
the thing.
they're gonna have a favorite.
They are gonna have a favorite.
And it's like, you're going to have to like take that risk, and maybe you lean into the one that's their favorite, because it's not going to be, prepare yourself for both scenarios. Because if
Yes.
you want them in their quote present of and then they fall in love with, the Atlantis or whatever it is, like the ancient one, and they like those characters more, like, you're going to have to be flexible and move your story that direction, because that's going to be really disappointing for them if that's the storyline they love and that's the one they only get to drop into sometimes.
Although it will be super fun if, like, so they fall in love with that storyline, and so you pivot that way, and it literally they change the course of history by inhabiting their past
Oh
lives.
yeah.
So fun.
See, here I was thinking of like, ooh, what if and this is a pitch for you. What if they stumble they stumble into how to do the past life regression, let's call it, at first. And then you make it a puzzle for them. Players figure out what the trigger is. It's a puzzle. It should take them a good to forever amount of time because a second grade puzzle is impossible for players to solve. So,
Mhm.
but either way, once they solve it and they figure out that how to go back and forth in time, if they're in the past for a specific amount of time, they could get stuck there
Yeah.
Mm.
and have that be like a negative in the context of like, this is the bad thing that can happen to you. It might not be so bad if you like it there, but like this is a thing that could occur. And that could be something that you play with as well.
Yeah.
Although, like, again, planning for both scenarios, because if they want to stay in the past, it'd be really cool to see them change the course of the future, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah. Or like what happens if like one of them gets stuck? Like,
Yeah.
you're like,
Zelda
how do you
Breath
deal-
of the Wild.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, so it's like, okay, how do you deal with that? Like, is that character gone now? Or do they make a new character for the present and then they can only pop back into that character when they're in the past? Like, I don't know. There's so many cool, interesting possibilities when you start playing with time. But I love the idea of that. And I do wish.
Or we could take it in a completely different direction. So they have become stuck in the past. What is in their body now in the present? I love a horror game, is what I'm saying. I love a horror game.
It's the doppelganger without being a doppelganger.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
I mean, you just left this body here
Mm-hmm.
empty.
I mean, it's a perfectly good body.
Yeah. That's one of the interesting things I think like Discovery of Witches kind of like is like they kind of touch on that and they talk about it and because they do like some time travel magic stuff in the that book series and they're sort of like we don't know what happens to like because you basically kind of like some of the characters are like old vampires and they travel back in time to play times when they were actually alive. And the best they can figure is like they're not there anymore. They're not somewhere else, on the planet. Two of them, and they're just like we don't really know what happens to the other you when you show up here. It's like the weirdest thing, and it's just like this little awkward like oh that's bad, and they're like yeah we should probably leave pretty quick, like just in case. Like it's just a very strange situation. But I kind of like that they never really settle on what happens because it is weird magic that most people can't do. So how would you even study that or find that out?
Yep.
But like that's also an interesting thing that your players might have to grapple with. So even if you have an answer, maybe don't tell them right away.
Well,
Let them,
I mean,
like, wonder.
I think of John Carter of Mars because it's the same concept.
Yeah.
Where, like, if you've seen the movie, like, he has this like whole chamber because he has to leave his body behind to go to Mars, and he's like, I don't want nothing to happen to my body, so it's like in a locked room, like panic room, essentially. So I was like,
Mhm.
yeah.
I thought you said a locker at first, and I was like, so he just like shoves it in the changing room.
Just shoved it in a locker. I was like, it'll be fine.
Oh, that movie was so much better than like it seemed to be. Like I'd heard so many bad things about it and I didn't want to watch it because like I kind of like the John Carter stories. Like there's sort of like there's a lot of problems with them 100%, but it's like one of those things. It's like, oh yeah, okay. It was like one of the first kind of things like that I'd read. And I was like, all right. But yeah, I mean it was actually a lot better than I thought it was going to be based on the terrible panning reviews of it and also the terrible marketing campaign.
I think like from what I heard, because I never did watch it, is that the marketing campaign really sold a movie that it was absolutely not. Yeah. So people like came in with mismatched expectations. So of course they were gonna pan it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They tried to make it much more palatable for like the normal person, so they took like the of Mars off.
Mm-hmm.
So people showed up to watch John Carter, and like then it was a movie about this person on Mars. It was very much not what they expected. So I think that was definitely a big problem. Yeah. I think it was before the time of Rotten Tomatoes was being a thing actively while movies were in the theater. I'm sure there's a tomato rating on it now, but yeah, I think it was before then, but it was like
We were just reading about it in the newspaper.
yeah, it's like back in the day where if you heard how bad a movie was, it meant it was bad, really bad.
Yep.
Back in the day. So
But it is underrated. I highly recommend it if you haven't seen it.
yeah, it is, and they updated some things that I did not like about the books just because they were outdated. Yeah, some interesting ways.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Julian, if you still listen to the podcast, write in
Yes.
and you
Yes.
can tell us how badly we butchered the French.
Yes.
And also tell us what you ended up doing with your
Right.
flashbacks and flash forwards.
Yeah.
Yes. Now we need to know. Now we're invested.
Yeah.
We're emotionally invested in your game now.
Or if someone else has headcanon about how this went,
Yes.
also write in.
Yeah.
Because I'd be down for that too. I'm soliciting fanfic. It's fine.
Yeah. This is my surprise face, Pooja. Not surprised.
Rude.
But no, I love this, and I honestly don't think enough games in their mechanics play with it enough. I feel like there's a lot of potential there, and it's just one of the things that, well, it's been done so much in video games and in books and movies and things like that. It's not something that's been done in TTRPGs much specifically because it is such a hard thing. And I think because it's asking so much of the GM to basically be running 2 campaigns simultaneously and never knowing when you're going to jump into one or the other. So you have to constantly be ready to run that type of game.
And Band of Blades, which is a Blades of the Dark hack, does a version of this.
Yeah.
Where your characters your players play both generals on a high level campaign and also the soldiers who are going out on each of these missions. So you have like a set of like seeing it from above and not on the ground and not experiencing all those horrors. And then you have a set of like characters and like pool that is going out boots on the ground and going through all of this. And so they're running kind of simultaneously, and I find that really interesting. The other thing that this reminds me of a little bit is I just did a game with Nathan, the Neon Caster, and they ran a campaign a few years ago based on the JRPG Persona. And so they ran it where they were playing one system for the waking world and playing another system when they went into like the alternate dimension where all the personas were and everything. And it reminds me, like, it's not this same exact scenario, but it's like all of those ideas live in the same, they all play in the same playpen to me. And I find that really, really interesting where you like have like a really interesting like narrative key in. So this could go one step further.
Yeah.
Where like the people in the past, like that world is so different that you're literally playing a different game.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That would be very cool. I love that. And we've talked on, and some people have done it where you like, I think it was a few episodes ago, we talked about if we were doing like a multiverse hopping situation. And my thought was to have like a different PBTA game.
Yeah.
Like depending on what you did, you jump into swashbuckling, you jump into sci-fi, you jump into, fantasy or whatever it was. So you had the same basic underlying mechanics for all the same things. And most PBTA games have playbooks that sort of like line up, at least their role as far as like personality and archetype, even if their powers don't exactly 1-to-1. But it would be a much smoother transition, I think, than a lot of kind of jumping around from different system to system would be. But I mean, maybe switching between things that were really different would even encapsulate the feeling of the world's even better, though. Maybe that would be a feature, not a bug.
I have to tell you, Kimmy, it's funny that you brought that up because you just reminded me that that's what I just did.
Oh.
I'm playing an actual play over at dinner in a game, and we were in a game of Cyberpunk Red. But unfortunately, I think there was something happened with the VTT that we were running where it essentially, like, all of our characters got deleted. And so in order to continue playing, we had to remake the game. And at that point, the GM was like, look, I'm going to shift us into this because we only have a few games left. And I have found a way, and we're going to essentially what we did is in Cyberpunk Red, you have something called a brain dance, which is essentially you patch into a system. And all of our characters had just gone through a period where they needed to go to therapy. And one of the players is the therapist. So essentially, we all went to her house and did a brain dance and ended up in a Monster of the Week game, but like a virtual one. And so we got to like pick our characters and do like our session 0 as if we're the Cyberpunk Red characters, choosing what we're going to do in the brain dance. And so, and it's very fun because we swapped, I mean, Monster of the Week's PBTA. So we changed mechanics. We all picked our playbooks as if we're like the characters, and we'll have moments where like these cyberpunk personalities will slip out because it's like a brain dance, but we're playing Monster of the Week. And it's very interesting to see how that came together. Especially because a lot of us basically picked polar opposite personalities from what our cyberpunk characters were. So it can be done, is what I'm trying to say.
Oh, that's so fun. I have to look that
Can be
up.
done. Can be taught.
Yes.
Awesome. We are running a little later than usual, so it might be time to wrap up. Thank you so much for your email, Julian from Patty. And hopefully, yeah, you still listen, and we'd love to hear from you. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for joining us for session 34, episode 13 of the Happy Jacks RPG podcast. Please support our amazing indie designer of the month, Steve D, him from 10 Star Games. And you can find them at 10stargames.itch.io or 10stargames.com. Thank you to our chat mod, James V, and to our amazing Patreons who keep us ad-free and independent. You can join their ranks at happyjacks.org/Patreon. And my name is Kimmy. You can plug your stuff too. I know you have stuff coming up, friends.
I'm Pooja.
Yeah.
And you can find me on the internet as Forgotten Saves. If you want to hear me play some TTRPGs rather than just talk about them, you can find me on the Happy Jacks back catalog. You can find me on the 12-Sided Stories back catalog, and you can find me on the Queen's Court Games back and future catalogs. I've got some fun stuff coming up with them as well.
Yay.
Ooh, exciting. And I am Vixie. I'm Vixie Bell. You can find me everywhere there is internet on at Vixie Bell or at Vixie Bell Cosplay. And also, I'm excited that I will be playing a game for Hispanic Heritage Month over on Diversity Saves. We will be playing Pasión de las Pasiones. Yes, by Magpie Games. And that's going to happen on Friday night, I believe, of this week. So we'll be playing that. I am over at dinner at a game right now. We're playing Monster of the Week. So that's their Twitch channel here. And I've got a couple more games coming up, but they're still like, I think I have a Fabula Ultima game that's happening, but there's no date that's been set yet. And a Ryutama game, those are my first pair of games that are going to be like the JRPG style of TTRPG. So I'm pretty excited about both of them as well. And I think that's everything I've got coming up so far.
Awesome.
That's
Yeah, and I'm Kimmy. I'm at Golden Lasso Girl, at Golden Lasso Games, at Happy Jacks RPG, all over the internet. I have like 7 email addresses. You've probably heard of them. Any of those locations, I have an email address that can reach me. I'm working on my game that was Kickstarted, thanks to all of you. I'm here on Monday nights. I'm running Starscape, like aforementioned game that was kickstarted by you. For a few more Monday nights. I feel like we're kind of getting to like the wrapping up point, but it'll be a few more weeks yet. And other than that, I am just frantically prepping kindergarten stuff until we settle into like a routine for the year. And I'm going to go write lesson plans because tomorrow I have to do my one-on-one testing to find out how much of the alphabet they all each know one-on-one. It'll be great. So that's what I'm going to be doing. That's what I'm doing. Kindergarten smorgasbord. That's what I'm doing. Just kindergarten smorgasbord.
Schmurgerber.
Thank you all. We are leaving you tonight with a song called Heavy Mahogany by our friends, the Dread Crew of Oddwood, an amazing pirate band that you can sometimes find at some Renaissance fairs And you can find them at thedreadcrewofOddwood.com with the. Don't forget the. And we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.